Alright, so we're going to pick up where we left off with multiplying. In J period, we already did this slide, so if you just want to fast forward until you get to the slide where we left off on, but I period, we did not get to this one. So when simplifying an expression that involves complex numbers, be sure to simplify. This little study tip here. So we went over yesterday that I squared is -1. So if we ever see an I squared, we need to change it to -1 in order to simplify. So in multiplying our complex numbers, we need to distribute just how we would when normally multiplying. So 4i times -6 would be -24i, and then 4i times I would be plus 4i squared. So -24i, we can't do anything with that. But we can fix this plus 4i squared. We change the I squared to a -1, so this would be -24i plus 4 times -1. 4 times -1 makes it a -4. And to keep it in standard form, I'm going to write -4 first, minus 24i. So it's important that we make sure answers are in standard form. So let's take a look at number B. Here we have two binomials, so we're going to need to FOIL. So we multiply our first terms together. So 9 times -4 would be -36. We multiply our outsides together. So this becomes plus 9 times 7i would be 63i. Our insides, -2i times -4 would be positive 8i. And then our last terms, which would be -2i times 7i, which would be -14i squared. We need to combine our like terms, so this is -36. 63i plus 8i would be 71i. And then we need to change this -14i squared. The I squared becomes a -1, so we can change this to a positive 14. And again, we have two like terms here that we need to combine. So -36 plus 14 would be -22. So we need to start with our real number. So -22 plus 71i. All right, we have 3 more examples of multiplying. So here we have -3i times 10i. We would multiply our real numbers together. So this is -30, and we have 2 i's, so this would be I squared. Now our I squared becomes -1, so -30 times -1, this would change it to a positive 30. For number 12, we need to distribute our I, so this becomes 8i minus I squared. I squared, we need to change to -1, so 8i minus -1. This becomes a big plus 1, so 1 becomes positive. So this is 1 plus 8i. So again, we need our real number first to make sure that it is in standard form. 13, we have two binomials, so we need to FOIL. So we multiply our first terms, our outside terms, our inside terms, and then our last terms. We combine our like terms, so we have 15 plus 2i minus this I squared would be a -1, so minus -1 would become a plus 1. And then we need to combine our 15 and our 1, so this is 16 plus 2i. The last thing we're going to do in 3.2 is solve equations, and we're going to get complex solutions. So we're solving quadratic equations. Quadratic, remember, means that it is x squared. So in our first equation for part A, we have x squared plus 4 is equal to 0. When solving, we need our x to be all by itself, so we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. So we get x squared is equal to -4. Take the square root of both sides, so x is equal to the square root of -4. When we have an x squared and we take the square root, we need to make sure we are including the positive and negative. So this is x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 4. Now we can change this square root of negative 4. Our factors of negative 4 are negative 1, 2, and 2. So we take out the negative 1, change it to an I, and we take out a 2. So this is plus or minus 2i. Okay, now let's take a look at B. So again, we're solving. We need to add 11 to both sides. So this is 2x squared is equal to negative 36. We need to divide both sides by 2. So x squared is equal to negative 18. Then we take the square root of both sides, so we get x is equal to the plus or minus square root of negative 18. Now we need our factors of negative 18, which are going to be negative 1. 6 times 3 gives us 18. We can take this one step further. Say negative 1, 6 breaks down into 3 times 2. So we take out our negative 1, change it to an I. And then we can take out our pair of 3's. So this is 3i. But we're left with a 2 inside of our square root, so we have to keep that under the square root. So x is equal to plus or minus 3i square root 2. For number 7, example 7, we're doing the same thing. It says we're finding the zeros of the quadratic function. So when we're finding the zeros, we change f of x to be 0. So this is 0 is equal to 4x squared plus 20. We need to get our x all by itself, so we are going to subtract 20 from both sides. So negative 20 is equal to 4x squared. Divide both sides by 4. So negative 5 is equal to x squared. Take the square root of both sides. So x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 5. We can factor 5 into negative 1 and 5. So when we take out the negative 1, we get plus or minus I square root 5. Alright, for number 20, doing the same thing. We're finding the zeros, so we change f of x to be 0. So this is 0 is equal to x squared plus 7. Subtract 7 on both sides. Negative 7 is equal to x squared. Take the square root. So we get x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 7. Our factors of negative 7 are negative 1 and 7. So we can change that negative square root of negative 1 to an I. So we get plus or minus I square root 7. We have 0 is equal to negative x squared minus 4. I'm going to add the x squared to the other side. So I get x squared is equal to negative 4. Take the square root of both sides, so x is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 4. The square root of negative 4 is 2i. So x is equal to plus or minus 2i. So 4 factors down into negative 1, 2, and 2. So we take out the negative 1 as the I, and we take out the pair of 2's for the 2. Alright, last one. So this is 0 is equal to 9x squared plus 1. We need to subtract 1 from both sides. So we get negative 1 is equal to 9x squared. We divide 9 on both sides. So this is negative 1 over 9 is equal to x squared. We take the square root of both sides. So this is x is equal to this plus or minus square root of negative 1 over 9. when we take the square root of a fraction, we can take the square root of the top and take the square root of the bottom. So the square root of -1 we know is I. And then the square root of 9 is 3. So this would be I times 1/3, which we would write it as plus or minus 1/3 I, or we could write it as plus or minus I over 3. So we could write it either way.